It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me.
Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
This whole show is a tangent.
Cool. That's why I dig it.
Shazam!
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Mike Domitrz returns to talk about consent. Welcome to the show. It's been a while since an actual guest has been on the show, so I appreciate you sticking with me as I've been rounding up folks as well as traveling. You know, I've talked to a lot of government folks the last couple of weeks, at first in Georgia, then in Oklahoma. It's one of the reasons I haven't been able to get a show to you, especially last week we missed one, but, you know, numbers stayed good, so I appreciate you sticking around. But I do have a great guest for you today. I know this because he is a past guest. I figured with all the things happening on the news about women's safety, especially around the area of consent, let's get an expert to talk about it, because it really makes me mad, some of the attitudes people present, especially online. Don't read things online. There's a lot of ignorance and a lot of hypocrisy, quite frankly. But before I get ranting and raving with my guest, if you enjoyed the podcast, could you take a moment to head over to iTunes and write a quick review? It only needs to be a couple sentences. It doesn't need to be paragraphs, and it would really help us out. And while you're there, download the Reality Check with Craig Price podcast app and never miss an episode. It's full of extras like ebooks and audio seminars, and you can only get them through the app. But that's enough self-serving. Let's talk about consent with our guest and friend, Michael Domitrz. What the hell is going on, Mike? I don't understand what is happening. It's the 21st century, and between racism and sexism, society has not moved very much besides lip service from the 60s and 70s. So, you know, we've got the NFL, it's got domestic abuse problems, and we've got stories like frat houses, color-coding date rape drugs. What is going on with everything today?
Well, I think one of the big differences is that we're actually hearing about it. So these things were going on previously, but there wasn't an avenue or a medium who is giving credibility, which it deserves, to this discussion and saying, hey, look what's going on. People just sort of buried it under and said, come on now, that's just what people do. And not realizing, no, there's something seriously wrong about this. So now we're getting to have a conversation about something that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's just boys being boys is the excuse that they give. And that has to stop, because it's not boys being boys. It's sex assault happening from young men. It's not just something that, you know, you wink, wink. Oh, hey, you. I mean, there was a frat house. I guess it was in Michigan or Wisconsin. It was someplace cold.
It was here in my hometown. It was in Milwaukee.
Well, we need to get you some more local work, I guess. You're spending too much time traveling the world. We need to get you talking to some of the Milwaukee kids. But yeah, they're color coding which women to date rape, and they're doing this is a collusion. This is not just one or two guys. This is the entire frat house doing this.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when it comes forward. They did color code to give drinks that it was what it appears to be. They color coded to give certain drinks that involved certain drugs only to certain people. What's really weird is that they haven't figured out what was done with it, but it would appear to me you would do some of that for what you're describing. It's just very weird in the way that whole thing has happened. And you're right, though. This boys, it's just boys being boys. Here's the thing. People tend to think, how do you raise a young man to be a good man? How do you raise somebody to be a good woman? You know what? You don't. You raise him to be a good person. You know, you don't sit there and go, I want my young son to be a good man. No, have your young son be a good person. Have your daughter be a good person. When you focus on these gender roles, it puts people in ridiculous roles. And ironically, in roles that often are much more unhealthy and full of stereotypes that can be more dangerous for all genders.
And my guest today is the very familiar voice of Mike Domitrz with the Date Safe Project. And that aspect of, you know, gender, it seems like we're spending too much time trying to teach women and young girls how not to get raped, which is a sad statement that you even have to do that, instead of teaching young men how awful and wrong sexual assault is.
Well, that's right. Well, and here's the thing. Most men and women, people of all gender, transgender also, they know rape is awful and they know it's bad. They don't connect to the beginning stages of how they already participate in that behavior. And that's the big problem. So people will often say, well, Mike, if you teach, young men say men don't rape, well, what good does that do? Obviously, any guy who wouldn't rape would already be saying I'm not a rapist. Okay, that's right. So let's talk about the things that are already happening in our culture that teach everybody that behavior that leads to rape, or the behavior that it is fourth-degree sexual assault, is in our everyday dating, and we don't even recognize it, and we call that just normal. And that's the scary stuff. So for instance, somebody will say to me, you mean I should have to ask for a kiss? And I say, why wouldn't you? Well, I'm just going to go for it. They can always stop me. And I say, pause right there. Do you just hear what you just said? You said that you're going to sexually touch somebody and then make them stop you. What does that sound like? It sounds like predatory behavior. And they go, well, that's just dating. And I go, that's just the problem. And so this is where it's at the core issue. We need everybody out there to look at their current behaviors and say, hey, this is what's leading to the danger. And even the word like rape or sexual assault, people will disconnect with. All right, then let's talk about your average date. And let's talk about the husband and wife or married people who just turn around and think they can do something to their partner because they've done it before. All this stuff adds into the conversation.
And I'm not someone who would blame, media for the world's ills. I mean, I don't believe video games cause violence because there's way too many video game players versus the amount of people who commit crimes. So the disconnect there on the numbers. But when it comes to things like this, like you said, kissing without asking, that's pretty much the ending of any 80s rom-com that had kids, where the nerdy little kid finally gets up the courage and then just out of the blue kisses this girl, and it's like, that's the big ending, where that's unwanted advances. That's so much in the culture. You see any movie, any television show, I constantly am looking at it, and you can see where it could be considered assault if there wasn't implied consent, which is not, I don't even know if that exists, but in the movie, it turns out okay. But in real life, that does not turn out okay.
Sadly, in movies, dating violence is considered passion. What I mean by that is, think about how many movies everybody out here listening has seen where they are in the middle of an argument. Maybe the partner is even pushing them away, or if it's a heterosexual couple, the female's pushing them away and they're being violently grabbed by their partner in this heated argument. And then suddenly he sexually starts kissing her and taking her to bed, and it's supposed to be this incredible experience. Think about what that would be like in a real relationship. Your partner is furious at you, grab them, you start kissing them, and passionately moving to the bedroom. That would clearly be sexual assault, and anybody out there would be like, oh my gosh, my partner would kill me if I started kissing them in the middle of an argument or a fight like that. Yes, because that is unhealthy, it's unnatural, disrespectful, yet you see it all the time. The Super Bowl commercial, just a little over a year ago, it was one of the most popular commercials. The boy is going to prom or homecoming with a girl. He walks across the dance floor, kisses her, and then he's driving home with a black eye with his dad. And it's like it's worth it. And he got the black eye from the girlfriend's boyfriend because he just went over, grabbed her, and kissed her. And this was considered cute, adorable, that he had the courage to go do that. That's messed up.
Yeah, and that's been like that for decades. So it's one of these things that has kind of seeped into the culture. And one of the things that's also seeped into the culture is because I'm never read comments on articles about sexual assault. It's awful. You know this. You write articles and you've seen the comments, but I'm looking through the comments and people are always talking about, well, if she dressed like a slut or if she dressed like this, then she probably deserved it. And that's the implied that every single person who gets assaulted is dressed inappropriately, if there's such a thing, or if you are dressed inappropriate, you deserve to get raped.
Yeah, and they're horrible because those comments, one, are triggering for survivors. They're painful. They're victim blaming. And here's the whole concept is ridiculous because you can ask that, the majority of the people who would write that in a comment, and you're right, you see horrific comments in these articles, and they would write that. You could walk up to that person and say, wait a second, if I'm in a long-term relationship, marriage or other kind of long-term, I walk in, my partner is naked in bed, not asleep, but naked in bed. Can I do whatever I want to my partner sexually at that point? Most people would go, well, of course you can't. Of course, obviously you can't. Then how come you can put some clothes on the person and say now they deserve it? It doesn't make any sense. You can choose to disagree with someone how someone dresses. You can choose to say when that person dresses like that, I feel it's overly sexual. You can choose to believe that. The fact is you still have to respect their boundaries, and you still have to respect them as a human being. So even if you disagree with how somebody dresses, acts, talks, what time they go to somebody's place, how much they drink, they are a human being that deserves respect at all times as a human being.
So where can we start? Because I know that we can't fix this problem overnight, because obviously this is something that you do for a living. You're very passionate about to try to stop, and it's still happening. You've made an impact, but it's so enormous that we're not going to fix it overnight. But what can we do to start changing the culture?
Well, one thing we can do is be aware of the conversations when they're occurring right next to us. If we've got a family or friend member making these kind of comments, what we tend to do is make the mistake of jumping on the family or friend member, sort of like, how dare you? How could you say that? Do you hear yourself? And all that does is shut down the person who we want to actually open the mind of. So instead, you want to be inquisitive. If somebody makes a comment like, well, did you see the way she was dressed? Genuinely be like, well, what do you mean by that? Because then it sounds like they want to learn. Let them explain themselves. Usually when somebody explains themselves, there is a lack of logic there. And when they say it out loud, you can then just follow through by something they said. Like, well, that was a really short skirt. And say, what would be a proper length skirt? And they'll name something. You go, okay, well, what if for one person it's just an inch or two higher? Well, I guess that's not a big deal. You say, well, couldn't the standards just be different for everybody? Couldn't they just want to wear what they want to wear? I mean, shouldn't they be able to do that in our country? And so you want to slowly get to that point of, why do we judge them by the clothing instead of the person they are, the fact they're a fellow human being? Slow the conversation down instead of attacking. When you attack, you don't reach anybody.
But that also throws in the assumption that only provocatively dressed people get assaulted. And, someone could be wearing a pantsuit.
That's correct.
The clothing is irrelevant.
How about the fact that sexual assault happens everywhere in the world regardless of clothing, including in countries where people's skin is not even exposed? It has nothing to do with clothing. What you're trying to do is slow that person's conversation down and help them realize that. So you're not going to say it in the first sentence, go, hey, it has nothing to do with clothing, because they already know you're mad, and they're not going to listen to you. So that's why we're going to first slow it down and go, wait, you think knee-high skirt is appropriate. This other person thinks 12 inches above that is appropriate. The fact is, don't they have the right to wear what they want to wear? You can disagree with how appropriate it is. It doesn't mean somebody has the right to do something awful to them, though. That nobody has the right to do that to you based on what you wear, how much you've drank. And you get into the whole alcohol thing. That's a whole huge discussion that gets people also fired up. Well, you choose to drink that much alcohol. I have the right to do whatever I want to do to you once you're drunk. Think about what you're saying. Think about what that sounds like. If you know that person's drunk, you have an incredible power advantage over the person who is vulnerable. That's why it's messed up.
And then there's situations like the frat house where they're putting unknown substances into drinks, and the person just happens to be at a party. Now people will say, well, they shouldn't be at a party like that. It's like, young people gathering shouldn't be excluded. It's, you can't keep them inside. Yeah. They should be able to be civilized and act like normal human beings, or they can be a little uncivilized and, like college kids get, but not inappropriate.
Right. Not with disrespect and harm for other people's bodies and boundaries. And that's the major point there. And this happened to be a Greek community house as far as a frat house. But these things happen in other environments. They tend to be more likely to happen in a close-knit group. So a fraternity is a close-knit group, but you also have athletes that sometimes live together. You also have close group of big friends that share a house together on a college campus. You can even have life experiences where it's a close-knit group. That's where the danger occurs, where people will act as a group. They would not act as individuals. And things get very scary and very dangerous.
And that leads into the issue of consent, being able to give consent, or just the fact that, that would be like being awake in conscience to give consent, but also just the fear of not being able to give consent.
Well, yeah, and that's the sad part is that we think consent is some legal jargon that's not realistic. As a society, that's not we, as in me, but we see society do that. And they go, well, consent is nice, but who really does that? And the whole problem with that statement is it's like a cop-out that I don't have to take responsibility because nobody else takes responsibility. That's almost like I'm jumping off the bridge because everybody else is jumping off the bridge. How about not jumping off the bridge? How about recognizing that if you want to touch your partner sexually, your partner should have that as a choice, not as something they have to stop you from doing. They should get a choice first. And when you ask people, does every human being deserve a choice before somebody touches them sexually or intimately? 99% of America says, of course they do. And you go, okay, well, how do you normally give somebody a choice? And they'll say, well, you ask first. Okay, well, what's one of the biggest things in someone's life? Their body, their sexuality. Why aren't we doing this? Why shouldn't you be able to turn to me and say, I've had a great time tonight. Could I give you a kiss? And when you actually say it, a lot of people go, well, that's not bad. I guess I could do that. In fact, that's sort of romantic. If you look at me right in the eyes, that could even be sexy. All true, but the most important part is they deserve that choice. And if you're going to be more sexually involved, much more than a kiss, they also deserve the choice. And don't you want to find out what they really want, not what you think they want? Talking consent enables all that to occur.
And one of the things I read in the comment sections that's it's ridiculous, but they do this. They go, well, does this mean that society is going to end up, we're going to need to have consent forms on our person at all times, and won't that take the romance out of it? Your response to that?
Well, it's proof of how backwards we are, that we think talking to our partner sexually kills the romance. Anybody who's actually sexually mature and confident understands that talking to your partner sexually is fun and exciting. It is the direct opposite. If you're telling me, well, if I have to stop and talk, that's going to ruin it, what you're telling me is you probably are lacking some sexual maturity and confidence, that you can't talk with your partner about what you both like, how you want to be touched, how you want to be kissed. All of that should be fun, should be exciting. And people are going, wait, I've been married 40 years. How dare you tell me that I'm not sexually confident? You're the one telling me you can't talk to your partner. That's not me. That's you. And so you might want to look in the mirror and go, why can't I naturally have that conversation? And why can't it be flirtatious and fun and discovery? It should be able to be all that. And that makes the romance that much more passionate and the intimacy incredible because you're both getting what you want, at least that you both feel comfortable doing with each other. You're not always going to get what you want, but at least you know what you're getting and you know you want to experience it.
I think a lot of the fear from the male's perspective is, and this is weird because I'm sitting here thinking we're two men discussing basically how to protect women, and I think it's important that more men talk about it because I think a lot of the responsibility of protecting and talking about it has been put on other women.
Well, I'm going to pause us there because one of the dangers is that you're seeing this now. You're seeing these campaigns. Men speak up for women. I can tell you that within those of us who work in the field, also people in women's centers, directors of women's centers, and people who work in this field, that is a painful campaign to watch occur. Here is why. It goes back to the machismo. The male is the protector, and it actually feeds into the whole problem. So one thing we want to consider out there is, while you and I happen to be two males talking about this, we're not really doing this just to protect women. We're doing this because we believe it's the right thing to do for human beings, which means if men deserve a choice, women deserve a choice, transgenders deserve a choice, LGBT, everybody deserves a choice of all genders, all sexual orientations. We're not speaking out for women. We're speaking out because it's the right thing to do for respecting human beings. And that doesn't mean that we're not for women. Obviously, we are. We're for all genders. We just got to be careful of saying, you know what, I'm out here trying to protect women. It's, once again, they get that machismo of the male superior and somehow needs to protect.
Well, I think it's baby steps for me. I mean, it's one of those things where I would love it to be that way. I'm not sure I think there's an evolution that's going to happen to get it to where it's that perfect everybody's situation. I think what we have to do is there's so many macho people who think they need to protect women. I think we need to harness that to some degree, and that's a good starting place. It's not a finishing place.
Wait, here's why we try to actually not make that a starting place.
No, that's why I'm asking. You're the expert.
Yeah. As soon as the male starts to think I'm the protector, he's back to being in control. So ironically, and I know that's not what you're saying, but that's what happens. Males like, oh, look at me, I'm protecting the woman. And it's about him, which means he's controlling in some form or fashion. It actually leads to the problem getting greater instead of protecting it. Because you know who he protects? The women he cares about. But he'll turn around and do the same thing to other women that out at a bar when he's out, because it's about protection, and he doesn't worry about protecting her. And so instead he's back to his male machismo of, look at me, I'm the male.
Well, I bring it up because I don't see enough of one specific gender speaking out, especially since that particular gender is the one that is usually breaking the law and putting the women in that situation. That's why I say it, because I just don't see as many men. I mean, you are what I would call a rare exception who's out there speaking. I'm sure you know a lot of people who in that, but as a common person, a layman who doesn't really deal with this on a daily basis because I don't have kids. I'm not single, so I'm not dating. I only have my wife to worry about. And so, you know, in my mind, I've got my little clique that I'm concerned about, and then I am concerned about the rest of the world. But there's little I feel I can do, and I really don't see a lot of men speaking up. Well,
and you're right. No, you're right. And here's the thing. And when men do speak up, we get unfair compliments. And what I mean by that is I get way too much credit in this line of work, myself and many others, because I'm a man saying the words. And that's also a problem, because the fact is women have been paving this road for decades and centuries before most men have been involved in the movement. We're in the movement because of so many women that have paved the road. And what they do is they go, oh, that's so great that a guy is saying that. No, it should just be a natural conversation regardless of gender. And you're right. What does happen is because we don't publicly hear men having the conversation, that people give men extra credit they don't deserve, or when men do have the public conversation, it is the Mr. Protector. Right? You see them on TV saying, if anybody touches my daughter, I got a gun sitting here. You know, even celebrities joking around on late night talk shows talk that way. And so it becomes this ultra protective male for the female once again, and it's not the healthy example. So then when you do have somebody publicly talking, hey, let's be respectful of all genders, people go, oh, wow, look at that guy. He's unique or he's different. It's often just because it's not the public image we see of men. Even though there's lots of men who feel that way, you feel that way, I can feel it in the interview, we don't get to hear it publicly. And you're right, so therefore there's this perception that there's few men. When there's lots of men who get it, it's just that they don't have a public forum maybe to be sharing it.
Yeah, no, I don't feel like it's my place to speak out unless it's like in my face and it's happening in my presence.
And that's where we're going to see a change. When we'll know the culture's changed when you feel that it's just everyday place for you to speak out because it's the norm. It's the right thing to do. And that's where we still have a ways to go, because of what you just said right there is very true of a lot of us, right? You're sitting in a situation and think, well, I'm not going to speak up on this specific element. It's really not my thing, versus going, you know what? It is my thing. I'm a person. I'm sitting here, and a person deserves respect. And it just becomes common conversation.
Well, before I let you leave, I know there's been a couple new laws that have been enacted. One that I really wanted to talk about, because it seems ridiculous that it needs to be there, but it absolutely needs to be there, and that is the yes means yes law that they passed in California. Can you explain it a little bit and give us a little bit more clarity? Because it just hearing it sounds weird.
Yes. Okay. So here's a couple things about it. One, it's not what people think it is. So I'll explain that in a second. Two, when it first came out and they named it, I thought, well, this is rather redundant. Affirmative consent is actually what it was referred to as. Yes means yes was sort of the slang for it, but affirmative consent. Now, for many of us in the field, we thought, really? That's what consent is, affirmative. So why are we, it's pretty much saying consent. So it seems like a little weird because consent should mean that you both agree to this. That is the whole concept of consent. Now, at the same time, I get it. They thought by putting, and my impression is, by putting the word affirmative in front of it, people would then start to realize consent means a discussion, an agreement between two people. And so they were trying to make it more obvious of what this consent really means. And I applaud that all the way. And for that reason, I have said this is a great move because it's starting a conversation and it's making policies. It's a college legislation. It's not a state law, ironically. It's a state law towards college policies. They all have to have this policy. It is not yes means yes, ironically, even though that's what they're all calling it. You do not have to verbally ask and get a yes. That is the number one way they can say you do have clear consent. But it is also allows for non-verbal agreement if it's, for instance, overt, like nodding of the head or taking a sexual advance at that moment with your partner. And so it's not even what people think it is. And so a lot of people in uproar saying, you think I have to ask. I wish that was the conversation we were having, because I think that's where we want to be talking. But that's not what the law says. It's just saying the consent must be blatantly obvious. And shouldn't that be common sense? Like, you shouldn't be guessing, oh, maybe I have consent, or I'm pretty sure I do. No, you better know that's another person's body. And that's what the legislation was doing, saying that the college campuses in the state of California all have to have a consistent policy. By doing this, we have it more well-defined. Survivors are going to know more of their rights, hopefully. More education will be done on campus around consent because this is a more defined example. That's the whole concept.
So it's really not anything more than getting consent, blatant consent, because the whole consent issue, a lot of people don't understand that often women are put into positions where they are afraid to say no, or they're incapable of saying no. And yet because they didn't say no, there is no, or didn't defend themselves or fight off the attacker, then it is implied consent for a lot of in the legal system sometimes.
Yeah, there's an old analogy, and to be fair, survivors could be of all genders, right? So this could be a male, female. There's an old analogy that if you're walking down the street at night and you get mugged, if you don't yell, please don't mug me, that if it goes to court and they catch the person who mugged you and they put you on the stand and say, did you yell, no, please don't mug me? And the person goes, well, no, I was just in shock it was happening. Well, clearly you wanted to be mugged. And people go, well, that's just a crazy example. Well, think about it. When you say somebody was sexually touching me and the person goes, well, did you tell them you didn't want to be sexually touched? Well, no, they should have asked me first. They didn't have the right to do it in the first. Well, you didn't say don't sexually touch me. It's your fault, not theirs, that they touched you. I mean, it's just insane. If I take my hand and I sexually touch another person, there's only one person responsible for my hand, me. I mean, that's the thing. This is such common sense. But people put illogical emotions into it because it's change. Because we're saying this, the old way is not okay. And so they become emotional because how dare you tell me my old system doesn't work? And they get angry. Instead of going, do you understand this approach of respect? It's actually easier to do than the old way. It's the right thing to do. It makes it more comfortable. And so that's why clarifying consent is agreed upon by two people. That's wonderful. You should want to know your partner wants it. It's this fear of change that causes a lot of this, kickback.
Yeah, and I see it all the time. It's usually older people going, well, back in my day, it was so much simpler. Back in your day, a lot of things bad happened, and we didn't know about it. I think you'd be amazed by how many people will come up to me of ages that people would consider older, not younger age group, and say, Mike, oh my gosh, so much of this was happening to me and my friends back in, and it could be the 1940s, the 1950s. You just were not allowed to talk about it. If you did, how dare you get yourself in that position? As a young woman, you were not supposed to be sexual. You were not supposed to be. Yeah, this is not new. Like we said at the very beginning, the difference now is that people actually feel they have a place they can speak out and be supported. Now, we still aren't supporting the way we should, but more supported than they've been in the past. And therefore, we're hearing a lot more about what's always been taking place. Well, we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to talk about, and we just couldn't possibly do it. It would be a whole series. But where can people find you, Mike, and learn more about what you do and how you affect campus life?
Well, we'd love to have them find us in any medium that they prefer. So if they want to go directly to our website, it's datesafeproject.org. You're going to go on a date, you want to feel safe, and you don't want to feel like it's a project. Datesafeproject.org. They want to find us on social media, really easy, facebook.com/datesafe. And if they want to find us on Twitter, datesafeproject, same as the website, same as YouTube, Date Safe Project, wherever they want to find us. They can find us under those names. That's what we are. I'm the founder of the Date Safe Project, and thank you so much, Craig, for this opportunity.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show. I think you do great work, and you're such a great human being. Not a great guy. You're a great human being.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Likewise, I always enjoy when we get the time we get to spend together.
That's the show. Thanks again to Michael for coming on short notice. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter at realitycheckpodcast.com, like the Facebook page, and follow at realitycheckpod on Twitter. Any comments, questions, or guest suggestions should go to Craig at speakercraigprice.com. We'll see you next week.